like you to introduce yourself. Tell me first, Marty, what's your full name?
Yeah, my name is Marion Savaggio Campise, Jr.
Junior. And what year were you born?
Pardon?
What year were you born?
What year I was born in 1945 in Winter Haven, Florida.
Okay.
I was a war baby born in 45. My father was in the Army and met my mother, and my father looked good in the uniform, and there it was. A year later, here I come.
Here you are. Now tell me, when was the first time you realized you had Poggioreale relatives?
You know, when I was 23 years old, I got out of the Air Force, and I came to Houston to really find out about my family on my father's side. And my Aunt Rose and my grandmother Lena Savaggio Campise, they used to talk about Poggioreale, and that's where our family was from. They never was there. My grandfather, if I'm correct, he came from Poggioreale, but my grandmother Lena Savaggio Campise, she's second generation, which makes me third, so they really didn't know a lot about Poggioreale. They just knew they were from there, so you couldn't ask them a question and they could answer really anything about it. The way we found out about it is we just had to go over and see for ourselves, and we
so
did.
You took a trip to Poggioreale, right?
Twice, I did. I have a cousin, Zena Mercuria, and her husband Martin. They have a 30-acre grape vineyard there in the hills above Poggioreale. And like all people there, you know, they lived in town, but their farm was up on the side in the hills. And so in '97, I went over and spent a week with them, and then 5 years ago, went and spent 3 weeks with them. So I got a fairly good knowledge of how they lived, and then a lot more about my family. Family's all gone. I think I had the cousins, the two cousins, really my only relatives there that I'm aware of. But you know what I found out is there's a lot of Americans, especially from Texas, who go to Poggioreale, and then they come home and they talk about it. So it's a great place to be from.
Introduce yourself, sweetie.
I'm Ruth Buttecali, Burke, and I was born in Houston, Texas in 1955. My parents are, my dad is Lee Buttecali, my mother is Rose Savaggio. Both of all of my grandparents came from Sicily except for my grandfather, Frank Savaggio. He was born here. But my grandmother, Maria Polito, who married my grandfather, Frank, she was born in Poggioreale, and she came to America in 1916. She was about 20 years old. So she only spoke Italian, you know, but she talked a lot about Poggioreale. I remember, growing up and spending time with her at her house and making the spaghetti and the Italian cookies and so she said, she always said it was beautiful. It was very beautiful. And then my other grandmother, Grace Savaggio Buttecali, who married Frank Buttecali, she too came from Sicily, but she was a young girl. And she would tell the story how when she came from Sicily, which was in I have the date, 1902, I believe. She got married in 1902, so it was a little bit before that. And she said it was like a ship, a ship with sails, so it was like a schooner ship. Whereas my grandmother Mary, she came through New York at Ellis Island. And so I actually visited Ellis Island with my cousin Nancy and my daughter Monica. It was in the 90s, and we went to Ellis Island, and we did. We found their names there. It was very special. That was very special. I actually have the actual trunk that my grandmother brought from Poggioreale. So I inherited that when nobody else wanted it, and I said, well, I'll take it.
Absolutely.
And I still have some of her patterns in there. She was an excellent seamstress. She could just sew beautiful things. She didn't really read or write English at all, but she could just look at something and make it. And she was always busy with her hands making things. So I just saved all those patterns in there. And so, let's see, so my grandfather, Frank Buttecali, he passed away when my dad was very young, so none of us really knew him, but he did come from Sicily as well. And so just always grew up with that influence in my life. And, you know, I had my cousins. We all lived in Houston in the Heights area. And so we, you know, every Sunday we went to my grandmother's house and had spaghetti and meatballs. And, you know, that was the thing to do. And so we're still, all of my first cousins and all, we're still very close and stay in touch.
Now tell me, are you kin to Marty?
So I am kin to Marty. I met Marty later.
Yes.
Through his Aunt Rose Campise. Rose was a very close friend of my mother. So I had always heard of her and heard of her name, and I would go and visit. I remember visiting her too. You know, you know, we all got together when there were weddings, and we had a few family reunions, and so we all stayed in touch, you know, close like that. And I always liked visiting with Rose because I almost felt tall when I was around her, you know.
She was short. You had to look straight down.
Her and my grandma Mary too was very short.
They were short-sighted.
We really didn't think we were that short when we were around them, yeah. And so it was, you know, and so as far as going to Poggioreale, so it was kind of always a dream, you know, to go and see it. And in 1999, my husband, he says, well, I want to take my mother to Disney World. I said, okay, you can take your mother to Disney World. And I'm going to take our 2 older daughters to Poggioreale, to Sicily. We're going to go to Europe. How about we go to Europe? And so my cousin Nancy, we grew up like sisters, you know. So it was just 4 of us, as 4 women. We went to, first we started in Venice, Rome, and then we flew down to Sicily.
So the first time you walked into Poggioreale, tell me your impressions.
You know, it was beautiful. It was just like that trip was in the springtime, and everything was green and everything was blooming, and it's like there were the olive trees and fields, and the sheep were going through the little town. And so the little town in 1999, it didn't look all that destroyed, in all honesty. It wasn't extremely overgrown with grass and all. You could just walk through the town, and you know, the shepherds the sheep would go through the town, and so it was a beautiful experience. And then
you know what you notice though, is there's a beautiful town built for 20,000 plus people, which really only had like 12 to 1,400 people.
You're talking about the new town.
In the new town,
yeah.
It was, the earthquake was in '68, I think.
Right.
So they were gone 5 years before they get to move back into the new town, which was again built for 20,000 people. 1,400 showed up. So it was this beautiful town with not very many people in it. That's the first thing that I noticed. Mm-hmm. And the culture changed. You know, the old town Poggioreale, everyone walked wherever they went. It was meant to walk to the grocery store, to the fish market, to the bread, to the bakery, to the mule pen where they washed their mules when they came in from the fields. But the new Poggioreale was different. You had to have a car to go visit your friends or go to the grocery store. So I think the culture just didn't change with the city. A lot of other towns we've talked about earlier today, Sala Peruta, they built on site. They rebuilt their town. So that culture stayed the same, the people stayed. And Poggioreale is still a wonderful place to go. There's still some of our relatives are still there. The Sicilian blood is still there, strong as ever. So a great place to visit, just different than the old Poggioreale. When you walk through the town of the old Poggioreale up on the side of the mountains, it's like, you know, it's like being in a ghost. You could see the kids playing in the street. And my cousin's husband, Martin, showed me where he went to school in this little schoolhouse.
Yeah.
And you know, you could just see the kids in there, and you could see the neighbor talking to the next door neighbor. And it was a safe place. There was no real crime or anything, maybe petty crime, but nothing major in the town. It was a wonderful way of life. And to be fortunate enough to live in the 1800s and up until 1967, really, until the earthquake hit, it was a wonderful place to be. I wish I could have gone to Poggioreale before 1968.
Absolutely.
So my Uncle Nick went to Poggioreale in 1967, I remember, and he came back and he talked about how beautiful it was. This was before the earthquake.
Wow.
And he met with the relatives and he brought down beautiful gifts. I mean, I still have this gorgeous ceramic piece that he gave my mother. You know, I inherited that. And so, you know, that too made an impression on me. But the old Poggioreale kind of sits on a hill, you know, and you can kind of look over,
Beautiful.
and you have a beautiful overlook. The new Poggioreale it's interesting, you know. It's like an interesting art piece that doesn't fit the character of Sicily.
Exactly right.
It just doesn't fit, you know.
No,
It's like if you put a modern house in the middle of
The historic.
historic district,
Yeah,
it's
good
just,
analogy.
it's just gonna
Nothing wrong with it.
right.
Just
yeah.
didn't have that
Yeah.
Sicilian feeling of the
Right.
old Poggioreale.
Right.
Mhm. So the question I had prepared you for was, tell me what is meant to know that you were from Poggioreale.
What is meant to know?
Like-
What it's meant to you.
You
to
had
know
meant,
that you
meant to you.
We got that straight. You got it?
Okay. You want me to answer that first?
Well, go- if you want to, I will.
You start. You go first.
All right. It's a little bit unique to me, different than my cousin here. You know, she was born in Houston. She was raised in the Sicilian culture. I was raised in South Georgia with my mother and stepfather. Didn't really know I was Italian until I was 22.
Oh my.
And I got out of the Air Force myself and came to Houston really to find out about my family and really who I was. And then, of course, my grandmother and Rose, my aunt, and my uncles, they started talking about this place called Poggioreale. And then you get a sense all of a sudden of where you did come from. And then the pride of being from a place that a lot of other people came from. And we all come to Houston, we all talk about it. But really in my later years, when I was able to go twice and talking to Ruth Ann, you know, she's been there. And then you talk to a lot of these people you meet, if they're Sicilian, they've been to Poggioreale. So I've talked to, 20 people who've been there, and everybody who's been there, they pick up a little something particular to them that they like. Like some like the grape fields, some like the feeling of the old Poggioreale. But it gives me pride to be finally from a place where I know where I'm from. Everybody can't say that.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, well, I'm from Pittsburgh. Well, Ruth Ann and I, we're from Poggioreale, and we're damn proud of it.
And it has an interesting story, about the earthquake and all. It is a very interesting story. So when I went there in 1999, I took these photos. And then, I was doing art festivals, and so I'd print them up and frame them, and people would go, where is that? Where is, and they loved them, and
I have several in my house.
I called them a walk back in time, because that was my feeling, when I went there. It's like I was just walking back in time, walking through Poggioreale. And my daughter Lacey, who she's a very good writer, she wrote a poem. She was in school. She wrote a poem in school, and it was published, and it was about her experience of going to Poggioreale.
Tell them about the bell tower. That seemed to be
the bell
the
tower.
cohesion for
Right.
us all.
It was up at the top of the stairs at St. Elmo Church bell tower. And, I had no idea it was going to fall soon. I was just taking pictures, and it was beautiful, composition, And in fact, what's interesting is that one of the doors that I took in 1999, an oval-shaped door, because you could look inside the doors and you could see the painted ceilings inside. And so, yeah, and that was very amazing. Anyway, this one door, it became one of my very popular art pieces that I would sell. And so when I went back in 2019, 20 years later, I photographed the exact same door again. But of course, this poor door had fallen down. It wasn't near as capstone had fallen off and so forth. But it was just kind of neat to see the exact same door again, you know. And so the first time when I went to Poggioreale in 1999, you know, we were walking through the street and we just saw these pieces of painted tile, you know, on the road. And I said, you know, I've got to bring something back for my family as a souvenir from this place, because my mother or none of my cousins had been here. It was just, you know. And so I said, let's pick up some of these tiles. There was nobody there but us. We had our guide that I found on the internet, and he was amazed at it too. He said, this is really nice. And so I bought I just picked, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I did pick up a few little pieces of the tile. And so when we got ready to leave Sicily, I had bought my cousin a purse there in the market in Sicily. My cousin Elizabeth Faila was her name. And she said, Ruth, you gotta bring me a purse. I always had to bring her a purse for a souvenir. She always wanted a purse. So I found a purse, and I said, so when we were leaving Sicily, I said, well, let's put all these tiles in this purse, and we're just gonna check it like it's a piece of luggage. And, you know, then when we get home, we'll just distribute the tiles, you know. And so we fly back to the U.S., and we're in New York, where we're getting our luggage. Well, the purse was not there. Where is the purse? I put a tag on it and everything, and, you know, it didn't show up. And so, well, we go home. I said, well, I guess I said I was going to, you know, bring y'all some tiles from Poggioreale, and I got Elizabeth a purse, but, you know, it didn't show up. And so about a week or so later, you know, this person came at my door, and he says, I have something for you. This from your, you know, it was, they would do that. They would bring your baggage to you. Now you have to go back and find it. But they would actually bring it to you. And he brought it to my door, and I didn't think I was ever going to see that.
Did you buy your purse in Poggioreale?
I bought the purse in Palermo.
Okay.
Bought the purse in Palermo.
Because the way that you buy things in Poggioreale, like in a lot of the small towns, number one, there's not a lot of money in the town, and number two, there's not a lot of people. So in order to have stores where you can buy wares, for cookware, really the seeds and flowers and spices, shoes, kids' clothes, men's clothes, they have these caravans that come in, and I guess they probably come in like every couple, 3 months. And they stay a couple of weeks, and they go from village to village to village. So that's how they sell their wares, and they get all the money they can get at the time, then they're going to the next place. So they make their living in places like Poggioreale, who really can't afford, you know, the full-time stores.
Yeah.
Get the benefit of people bringing in nice things for them to buy. So I thought maybe that's where you bought your purse.
Well, no, I bought it in Palermo, in the market there.
But your tiles were still in the purse?
So the tiles were still in the purse, and so, yeah.
Forget the tile.
My mother got a
What
tile.
else you got for
us? But what I was going to say, so in 2019 when we went to Poggioreale, one thing about Poggioreale, it's kind of a neat location. It's rather, you know, I mean, because to get to the coast, to the beach is only 45 minutes.
It is.
And so we, you know, with my daughters and our group, then we went to the beach, you know, after
Well, I went to the beach. Yeah.
visit and enjoyed
It's a
that.
good beach.
Yeah, beautiful beach. Yeah.
Castellamare.
Water and everything.
Yeah.
The water was clear.
Yeah.
It was good, fresh salt water. How's that for a
It was. Yeah.
paradox?
And the food, I mean, we ate at, you know, a place right there on the beach, and
Yeah.
food was always delicious.
Absolutely. If you were going to leave one last thought that you were going to leave for your grandkids, what would that thought be?
I'll answer that
You
first.
may, okay.
Okay. My thought for my children and their children is to make the trip to Poggioreale and stay a week. Stay 2 weeks if you can. But, you know, just being with them, you'll find them and they'll talk to you and they'll tell you about them. They'll tell you their history. They like talking to American people. And a lot of them speak English, enough of them to where you can find somebody who will understand what you're saying. So if I had to tell my kids something, I would say go see where you're from, Poggioreale.
Find your roots.